Come on now, Eddie. You know as well as I do that I don't have a gun.
Noir. Detectives. Thrillers. 3 words that defined cinema from its early days into the 1960s. But, while you might be familiar with these concepts, you might not be familiar with one of the biggest influences on the genre as a whole. Big Jimmy. A small comic series that was adapted into several Hollywood films. Created, written, and drawn by artist Jim McMillan, Big Jimmy is the story of Brooklyn-born detective Big Jimmy. The comics were an instant success, being adapted after only 6 issues into the first of the Big Jimmy movies, simply titled Big Jimmy. My mother named me Jim McFadden, but from every inch of New York where you can see Lady Liberty's shining light, they call me Big Jimmy, Private Eye. While critically well received and very popular, the movies did not sit well with creator Jim McMillan, who was completely locked out of the creative process. In an interview done in 1945, he said, "They sanitized my work. They turned my baby boy into a big old pussy." My darling, your love is like manna from heaven, and I am a starving man lost in the desert. I'd like to come home and have a feast. All right. I'll see you in a bit. The comic book was first published in 1934. By today's standards, the language is crass. By the standards of 1934, it was an outrage. The book received praise for its simple artwork and honest storytelling. By labeling the pieces in his art, artist Jim McMillan attempted to make sure that nothing was left up to the reader's imagination. In fact, when one young reader wrote to Jim in the letters column saying that he believed that when Jim shot his longtime lover, Judy, he must have felt sad and that he would have been frowning, Jim wrote back, "Hey, send me your issue. Send it to me right now. I'm going to label it that he is smiling. Jim was smiling when he shot her, and this is not a joke, this is a threat. I have your address. If you do not send me back my comics so I can send it to you with Jim smiling, I will come to your house and stab you in the eye." Jim McMillan was not afraid to go up against the bigwigs at Excitement Comics. In fact, he often took potshots within the issues at editor John Evans. Sometimes it did feel like we butted heads a little too much. Sometimes it felt like he genuinely thought that he was going to kill me at some point before either of us moved on. And, you know, that was certainly taxing on my mental health at the time. Actor Douglas Fairweather was famously frozen in 1945 after a long run of playing Big Jimmy in the Big Jimmy pictures, when his life rights were purchased by Walt Disney. There's something I've found to be true of all you educated types. You think too much. When asked how he felt about the actor who played his famous character, Jim McMillan said, "Good. I'm glad that he was frozen, because I was going to come and find him and kill him. This is not a joke. I was going to find him and stab him in the eye." Other noir films would soon begin to lift whole cloth from the Big Jimmy story.
Back in New York, I handled 31 suicide cases, personally. Everything from poison to jumping in front of the Flatbush subway. Stella's not the type.
In 1946, Jim McMillan was fired from Excitement Comics and never wrote another comic for the rest of his life. Now, Jim McMillan claimed until his death that you fired him because he slept with your wife. Is that actually true? No, that never happened. He was fired simply because of the quality of his work. At a certain point, I looked down at what we were publishing and I realized, oh my god, this is actually very bad. Big Jimmy would not return until the early 1960s, when he was revived by artist Salvatore Razzatoni. Do I feel bad about taking over writing and drawing the Big Jimmy comic books? Well, yes and no. Yes, because I had to take something from a man who meant so much to me as a child, and no, because I got the chance to make them good. In 1951, Jim McMillan died from injuries sustained while attempting to fight a mechanical bull while under the influence of weapons-grade LSD stolen from a communist friend. Though he left behind 13 illegitimate children, it's clear today that his true legacy is Big Jim.